you will see a parallel between shutting gates and opening gates and the armour of God. When we've got the armour of God in place, he enables us to shut gates and he enables us to open gates. Now, we've been talking about people. Now, what happens is we can go out and do what we call prayer walking. Now, prayer walking is recognizing that the very same things that happen in people happen in cities and in areas. And so I want to use an example. I was involved in planting a church at Carindale on one occasion. And I want to share some stories out of that. I've got a few others I could tell maybe at another time. We looked at Carindale and we said there's something not quite right about this suburb. I mean, it was affluent, you know, the big shopping centre in the middle of it and so on, if you know anything about that area. We would knock on doors and we found people afraid, they wouldn't talk to us. We went 6 months and we never saw one convert. And we said, Lord, what's wrong? And as we prayed, the Lord started to reveal some things. He said, he didn't say this verbally, but as we researched, we discovered the area pretty close to where Carindale Shopping Centre is, if you know that area, used to be a sugarcane farm. And it was run by people who were taken out of mainly out of Vanuatu. And they were treated like slaves, they were slaves, to run the sugarcane farms. Then we realised that Carindale has a range of hills running up on the eastern side and on the southern side. It's like an L-shaped group of hills. And so some of us who were praying, the Lord revealed to us, and it was a long story so I won't tell you, but he revealed to us that these peaks were being used by satanic groups. And in fact, one of our prayer team went up on White's Hill, one of the peaks, and he said, I was scared. He said there was this big wooden throne and there were animal heads all around it in a neat circle. And he said, obviously it's being used for some sort of satanic or pagan worship. And then we discovered that there were other peaks where there were other similar sort of groups meeting. We felt like the Lord was saying, I'm revealing to you what's happening. So we started to pray. And we wouldn't go up there because the Lord said don't. You know, one guy went there by accident and the Lord said that's all you need to see. We didn't go up. And so we started to pray over the area. We walked the streets. Now the benefit of walking the streets is you walk past houses. I mean, we can sit here in a room and we can pray for the suburb of Kelvin Grove or Red Hill. And we just, you know, it's like prayer is all over in 5 minutes. But when you go out and you walk the streets and you walk past a house and you say, Lord, would you just bless the people there? They've obviously got little children because they can see the playground equipment there. Or you walk past the next place and it's dark and the grass is, you know, way up and the paint's falling off. You can pray for a blessing over the people that they, and maybe even come back and help them. So you start to get a picture of what the place is like, and we started to discover people were scared. A lot of people were bankrupt. A lot of people weren't able to meet their mortgage payments. And the Lord started to reveal this as we walked up and down the streets. And then he started to say, this is related to what's happening on the hills. So we prayed, fasted, prayed. And then one day in prayer, we knew we had the breakthrough. And it's hard to describe how it happened, but it's one of those times where you just know you've broken through. And the Lord said to us, out of that, go up onto these hills. The very next day after we broke through, the Courier Mail wrote about how the council was coming in and cleaning up Whites Hill, Pine Mountain, and I forget the name of the third peak there, because there was a lot of rubbish and paraphernalia, and they're opening it up and establishing a picnic area on those three peaks and walking tracks through that area. And when we read that, we said, what's happening in the physical as what's happened in the spiritual. They've cleaned out all this stuff. You know, that same week we saw a whole family come to Christ. Amen. And then we started to see others come to Christ. And the church grew from 30 people to 100 people in the next few weeks. You see, that's just one story. I've seen that happen right across Queensland. Now, the other thing that I just want to share with you before I go tonight, we can't just go willy-nilly deciding to pray for City Hall or, some other, maybe we know that there's a certain Satanist group meeting in a certain place. We can't just go and jump in there. You see, Satan recognizes authority, and so does God. You know, we talked about the second heaven and rulers, and, there's princes over countries. There's princes over smaller groups of people, and then there's the demons that run around, and their assignment might be just to annoy us. And so we take the level of authority that has been given to us. Let me give you an example. There was a time when I was set aside, hands laid on me, and set aside to plant churches on behalf of our denomination. We called it Mission to Queensland, and it was to plant churches right across the state. That enabled me, because I had that God-given authority, to go into these places and claim victory. And we saw, I was making up a list the other day, and I'll very quickly go through it. We saw one town where it was very strong Italian heritage, and there was a mafia working there. We saw that broken up, and they made they tried to run one of the local businesses out of town and the church out of town, and they failed, and the business they tried to destroy was restored. Another town, there was a witch bought a block of land right beside the church, and she declared that she would not allow the church there and would drive all the churches out. She came to know the Lord. Another town, a councillor said, we will not allow a church, this is in Agnes Water. This councillor said, I've been a councillor here for the last 15 years or thereabouts, and as long as I'm councillor here, there will never be a church in Agnes Water. At the very next election, she was kicked out and a Christian put in. They're just some of the stories. And I can tell you story after story after story. I had authority to pull together prayer groups that on a statewide basis were able to pray. And we were able to deal with some of those statewide principalities and powers. Then I went to a local church over at Greenslopes, and the Lord very clearly said, peg out your territory. So we went to the four corners of the suburb, according to the map, and we pegged out our territory. We walked every street. You know what happened? I couldn't believe it the first time. We prayer walked through the week. We had a week of prayer and fasting. We prayer walked every night. That Sunday, someone came from the community and just said, I don't know why, but I just felt like I needed to come to church today. The second time we did it, the same thing happened. The third time we did it, the same thing happened. And so we started to get used to that. And then one day we went up and we prayed over the Greenslopes private hospital. And we particularly prayed over the mental health unit. The next morning, that was on Saturday, the next morning, one of the patients came, committed his life to Christ.
Praise God.
You see, he gives us, and at that time, I was only the pastor of the local church, and the local church had authority in that area. And before the Lord, I couldn't go beyond that. And that's why it's important. I can give you some scriptural references, but we're out of time tonight. That's why it's important that we don't overstep the mark. The downside of that was, I worked in an office in the valley at one point, right opposite the old Brunswick Street railway station, or train station. And where I parked my car was up behind the old McWhirter's building. And I would walk through the McWhirter's building to the office. And as I walked through, I realised there was a lot of new age people there. There was fire eaters and breathers, and there were tea leaf readers, and so on. And so I started to pray as I was walking through there, claiming that territory for the Lord. I started to get depressed. I started to get sick. And a good leader from New South Wales, in fact, came to me one day and he said, "The Lord gave me a picture for you." And he said, "I have no idea what it's all about." He said, "It's like a wagon wheel. And on this wagon wheel, there are candles at the end of every spoke." And he said, "It's hanging up." And somehow he said, "The Lord is saying that means danger and even death for you." And I said, "I know exactly where that thing is. It's in the old McWhirter's building." And he said, "Well, the Lord is saying," he said, "now I've got it." He said, "The Lord is saying you have no authority over that place." So we operate, if you're in a family, you've got authority there. If you're living in a neighbourhood, you've got authority there.